have an employee sign non-disclosure forms?
I'd have to know the specific circumstances, Representative. If you have one in mind, I'd be welcoming of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Tansey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of other questions, and I'll start with you had mentioned the benefit of the sunset provisions in the programs that we enacted last year, and I want to just kind of delve a little bit more deeply into that. I agree. I'm a huge fan of providing sunsets, clear intents, so that we can go back and measure the effectiveness of each and every economic development or each and every tax expenditure that we enact. Would you be in favor of putting a sunset on all of our tax incentives, our tax expenditures, all the programs that we offer in the state? I'm sure that if I started the question with, would you like more money to do what it is that you do? The answer would be yes. And I see a huge potential with our tax expenditures if they're getting proper analysis and proper review. I see that there's tremendous assets that we're underutilizing, and I think that providing this kind of a sunset on all of our tax provisions will force our hand in reviewing all of these programs. So would you at Commerce agree that sunsets are in the vast majority of cases appropriate for these types of incentives?
I'd want to look at each case, Representative. Tax credits vary dramatically in their purpose, in their history, in the degree to which individuals or companies need to rely upon them as predictable in the future. Mm-hmm. So tax credits in our tax code vary from the earned income tax credit for individuals, which is an economic development tool, through to the qualified jobs incentive tax credit proposed by Representative Shekarchi. They're very different. So I would want to look very carefully at their intended purpose, how predictable they need to be for the taxpayer, whether they're relying upon them for investment decisions or life decisions, before I gave you an answer.
In 2012, I asked because in 2012 we passed a piece of legislation that I sponsored that asked us to review, I believe it was 17 economic development tax incentive programs. In fiscal year 2015, there were 5 that were supposed to be reviewed. In fiscal year 2016, there are 8 that are supposed to be reviewed. As of today, none of those have been reviewed. And to me, that is as if a business were to write a business plan and not review it and just continue to operate, not look back and not be reflective upon how you could be spending a single dollar more effectively. In 2017, we have 4 more that are up. And I don't have the total of the tens of millions of dollars that these programs are taking up. But I just wanted to say that there's a very large pool of economic development money that exists, and I would love to have Commerce advocating alongside me to have an appropriate level of review on each and every one of these. And the nice thing about the sunset is that it forces us to, because when the 2012 legislation was passed, it was, we'll review them and then, we don't want to sunset them because we want that predictability, that all of that for the businesses. But unfortunately, it's not enough of an incentive for the government to perform the necessary oversight and review of those. So would you like some more money?
Well, I like the way you frame the question, but I'll resist the temptation for a moment. Let me say this, Representative. As you know, because we've had conversations.
It was our very first conversation that you and I ever had.
I think you made a strong and persuasive case then, and you do now. I do very much think that we need to look very closely at our programs and ensure that they're effective. A couple of things. First of all, the charge for the review of tax expenditures and tax incentive programs happens not to be in my jurisdiction. It lies elsewhere. I state that in response to questions when I want to make sure that the facts are clear. but I know that there may be staffing concerns around
And
the
there
degree of reporting that may be
absolutely
required.
are.
So that's why I'm answering you with precision, that it may not be my departments and agencies that ought to be the recipient of any additional funding. It may be others, and frankly, we're a team as an administration. I want to note that I would always like more money to conduct the pursuits that we believe would be of value for the Rhode Island economy, but it may be other departments that should receive these funds. Point number one, if there were to be any, and you have to decide whether that's possible. Second, I will note that in the last legislative session, the General Assembly and our administration engaged in a good dialogue around a preliminary proposal from us in Commerce and in the administration regarding the potential information that could accompany tax credit programs so that we could better evaluate them. Very understandably, in the midst of all of the discussions of the session, some of the language that we introduced didn't make it all the way through. I'm not in any way criticizing that. I think that may have made the most sense because we were starting a conversation. But I want you to note that we in Commerce and we in this administration have requested additional data from tax credit recipients as a possible provision. So we'd love to join forces with you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, Representative, to think more about what's the responsible way to do that. We've taken some proactive steps, talked about some possibilities. In no way do I mean to say that the specific actions that we requested would have been the right ones, but I think we're very much on the same page about the need to have enough data that we can carry out the work together and we can evaluate the work together.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you to make sure that these tax incentives are, in fact, adequately reviewed. I have a couple of other questions. Is there an inventory of companies based on size or number of employees in the state? In other words, do we actually know where the strength of our economy is, what size corporations are producing, how much into the economy? I listened to the review of all of these programs, and while I appreciate there are certain pieces of them, like the microloans or those that qualify exclusively for employees under 200, I appreciate that there is some attention paid to the smaller companies. I'm afraid that we're not paying enough attention to the whole of our economy, and that we're focusing too much on large corporations when I suspect that the vast majority of our employees are employed by small employers. So I see there's a chart opened in front of you magically. I would love a copy of that full report.
Sure.
I printed
Just
up
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you talk about the Brookings report, but this committee was not given the courtesy of having a copy of that report. And if you
Prior to its press release.
Yeah, I don't want to engage in an argument with the chairman. I accept the observations of the chairman. Offline, I would like to have a conversation. I think there were multiple meetings at the staff level, and information was provided. But if the chairman makes a representation, I accept it. I'm not going to dispute it.
I didn't get a copy.
I accept it, and we can remedy that and get copies. That's
Representative
the most.
Tansey, you may have gotten a copy because you went and got it.
No, I didn't. I printed it off of the interwebs.
It is available on multiple websites, but that's neither here nor there, Mr. Chairman. We will send copies, printed copies, bound copies to the members of this committee. Makes perfect sense. I embrace your point.
No, it's quite all right. So do we have a breakdown? Are there discussions about developing tax incentives or programs that benefit smaller companies? And this would be a great opportunity for you to talk about the microloans because, Sharon had referred to it and that there are two pending, and I'm very interested in the program and how it's going in Commerce.
The loan programs are in process as pertains to the selection of intermediary entities that will carry out the loans. Would you like a brief update on that process? Is Mr. Dan Jennings still in the audience? Mr. Jennings from the Commerce Corporation, would you please approach and offer a brief update?
meantime, do you have the breakdown on the number of employees and, the average number of employees per corporation or any of that?
There's several different sources for that kind of information. There's DLT has a database. That's one of the most authoritative and best. Brookings produced tables in the appendices. Take a look at Appendix D of the Brookings report regarding the industries that they focus on. Their job numbers, including change in the last 5 years, or I should say in the 5 years, 07 to 13, which was the most recent data available. So that's a summary version by industry area. So those would be two of the areas I would point you to.
Thank you. Welcome,
Mr. Dan Jennings, Senior Advisor at the Commerce Corporation.
Yeah, good evening. So as you know, there are the allocation we got, the $5.45 million, is split into two pots. 10% is reserved for microloans, the rest for larger small business lending pots. We put out two solicitations late October, early November. We got three responses to the microloan RFP, and we got 4 responses to the small business RFEI RFP, or the request for expression of information. Tomorrow, the Commerce Board's Access to Capital Committee meets. We're taking recommendations. Basically, everyone we responded, we got really good proposals. We're taking recommendations to our Access to Capital Committee. Everyone who submitted a proposal, we're recommending for an award. We think there's beauty in having a variety of approaches. You're going to see different ways we're going to reach borrowers. So we're going to be finalizing the award amounts over the next few days with our board, and we expect to make announcements shortly.
Is there geographic variety in or variation in the applicants? So I want to make sure, as somebody who represents, the southern portion of the state, that there are going to be lenders available throughout the state, that it's not concentrated just up in one region.
Yeah, we totally agree. There will definitely be geographic distribution, fair geographic distribution. In fact, one of the proposals, we're going to be working with various banks throughout the state, one of the providers, so we think it's going to be a very strong program.
All right, very good. I did receive clarification. I just want to, for those at home, on the anchor tax credit. I got confused between the X's and the dashes, but I have a key now, and there is in fact a application process for the anchor tax credit. So I just wanted to make that clear for those who may be watching at home. And I think I have one more. There's mention in the Qualified Jobs Incentive Tax Credit of a $7,500 W-2 withholding max. What's the average salary? What is that like? What is that the salary that represents?
Yep. I'll ask Mr. Gibson to prepare that for you. We'll probably have an answer before the end of the session.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions from Representative Sherpa?
Well, mine will be brief, I hope. Mr. Secretary, you correctly noted that some of these tax credits expire in 2018. Rep. Marshall asked you for a 5-year plan. Since this will all be over in 5 years, how about a fast forward a year from now? What kind of a conversation will we be having a year from now? Will we see the cranes in the sky? Mm-hmm. Will our unemployment rate even be better? Will it be improved? I mean, where are we going?
I believe we'll see signs of progress. The progress isn't going to happen overnight. The groundwork that needs to be done at this point in time includes hundreds, even thousands of contacts with businesses inside our state and outside our state. Some of those, a small number of those, will result in decisions to invest in ways that involve hiring new employees. As a subset of those, there may be a physical facility that a company wants to expand or start anew, construct. In those cases, there may be shovels in the ground. There may even be cranes in the sky. Not every project involves a crane. Of course, I know the expression is figurative as much as it is literal, but I think we'll start to see projects happening. We're very pleased that already, even though our programs have gone live only very recently, we have a company that's expanding, and it's a major manufacturer, and it's growing jobs, and we have some real estate projects where new residential space and new commercial retail space is being constructed or renovated. We have projects that are already moving right now. But of course, when a company makes a decision, a developer makes a decision, that decision is regarding the best pathway for a business. They may apply for and receive commitments of resources, but the groundbreaking and ultimately the ribbon cutting in that sequence, those are down the line. So that takes time. But I believe that in a year's time, a couple years' time, several years' time, we'll see more of what I've just described. And we'll also want to make adjustments. Representative, honorable members of the committee, there'll be programs that don't result in as much of an effect. There'll be programs that outperform our expectations. We'll want to invest where programs are performing best. That's the kind of dialogue I hope we have.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And as much as we've peppered you with questions tonight, I'll never forget that the state motto is hope. So I hope my colleagues are hopeful, and I do hope that a year from now we will be having this conversation and you can say, I told you so. I hope you get the last word.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm hopeful too.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions? Well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, in the industry cluster grants, are nonprofit incubator organizations eligible for those industry cluster grants?
I don't know the answer to that specific question, Chairman. I would welcome a chance to get back to you.
Okay. As you know, certainly as Mr. Gibson knows, I'm the co-chair of the Defense Economy Planning Commission, and defense economy is very important to me. We had a report done which showed that there were 33,000 jobs that are in the defense industry in the state of Rhode Island. One of the programs I'm particularly interested in is the Procurement Technical Assistance Program, and I'd like to know what the status of that program is right now, because I understand, well, I know that between May 1st, 2015 and September the 30th, 2015, $16.2 million in government contracts was procured. What is it to date? From September 30th
I don't have those data for you now, Chairman, but I'd be happy to present those to you.
Typical answer, unfortunately. So, with that, any other? Yes, Representative Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other question. I just want to follow up on Representative Tanzi's question to you on the matrix for the ROI, the return on investment for taxpayer invested incentives. You commented that that's out of your department, that's in the tax department. But wouldn't you think that it would be advantageous to Commerce Rhode Island to know whether or not those taxpayer incentive programs are working and what they're bringing back for a return on investment? Not only annually, but maybe even biannually. And ultimately that would guide you better in knowing which way to invest the taxpayer funds on an annual basis?
I would, Representative. I definitively would, and that's why in the last session we proposed a measure where we would obtain even more data on the outcomes of and the activities of our tax incentive programs. As I mentioned earlier, perhaps with very good reason, I believe so, that precise method of going about it was not accepted, and the measure was not adopted by the General Assembly. I think that was probably with very good reason. But yes, I very much agree with you. We've also made the case that such data are essential.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, I am going to adjourn the hearing at this particular time, but I think we still need more information, and perhaps we'll be following up with some questions, and we may be calling you back, because I think we need more information, we need more data before we go into the next budget cycle. Where you are, what you're doing, I'd like to see more concrete results or more information that you have, even though if you know, as I've mentioned before, some of the the number of applicants and some of the programs that you have, the things like that. Not that you've given them grants out. I'm not looking for specific names of companies or things like that. I want to know exactly what's happening. As has been brought out here several times before, we've given you an awful lot of tools in your toolbox in forms of dollars, and I think we need to know.
You absolutely do, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'd welcome the opportunity to follow up, and I will note in the presentation I've shared with you, the paper presentation, in most cases where the program is operational, you do have the number of applicants listed. It's in writing to you. There were other instances where there was a specific piece of data you requested. We will make note of those, and we'll be happy to oblige where the data is available. I really am grateful, Mr. Chairman, and honorable members of the committee for the chance to talk to you, for the partnership we've established to drive the Rhode Island economy forward, and I look forward to our future conversations.
And we expect the Brookings report to be in our offices tomorrow.
That would be my pleasure, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and we're going to adjourn for this evening. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a night. Thank you.